Hey, good morning, Pete, North Las Vegas. Did a video yesterday starting this build, and while I was putting the upper together, I got my lower out of jail. So we're going with another new Frontier Armory, and couldn't find a scratch on it, so we're ready to get going here. First thing we're going to talk about is the pivot and takedown pins. And we'll see how that mates up with the upper and how much slop we have or don't have. So I'm just going to kind of throw the pins in real quick. I'm using a M5 Aero Precision lower parts kit. So we'll see if these pins are loose or snug. Okay, so Aero Precision in their description says that using their pins on other DPMS patterns, the pins may stick out a little further than they do on their M5 lower, and these pins do stick out a little bit more, but I'm okay with that. That just makes them easier to pop out instead of them sitting completely flush like that. And it was the same thing on the back before this thing fell over. But anyway, like I said, I'm okay with them sticking out a little bit further. Let's see how much slop we got. Okay, so there's a slight amount of movement between the upper and the lower. And I just think it's the Aero Precision pins because I used a rear spare pin that I had and put that in here, and the slop in the rear went away. So I think these Aero Precision pins are just ever so slightly too small for this build. Now, we're not dead in the water because the... Okay, so on the tensioning lug, what I'll do is I'll snug it up pretty good. And that just gives the nylon tip a little bit of crush, a little bit of a set. And then what I'll do is back it off to where it just barely touches the lug. And you can see that all the slop is gone. And I can still slide the pin out very easily. Okay, so that little minor issue is solved. Okay, so a lot of pistol grip designs, once you get them installed, you won't be able to get to that set screw unless you take this off. And the Magpul Myad that I'm using, I don't know if all Magpuls are like this, but the Myad has an extra hole in the top. And if you have a ball tip focus, all right. If you have a ball tip Allen, you can get up through that hole I just showed you and still get access to your tensioning lug. So that's a good benefit to the Magpul. Okay, if you're not familiar with the Magpul Myad, they give you different back straps. So depending on how big your hands are or what your preference is, you can go with the different back straps. I prefer the straight, smaller one, and that just gets my finger where it needs to be on the trigger for my size hands. I have like medium, large hands, and they also give you a front portion here that does not have the A2 bump out. If you want to swap that, you just slide it in and out. A lot of people don't like these, but I don't have a problem with them. I actually kind of prefer them. It allows me, when I'm carrying a rifle by the pistol grip, just to get a little better purchase on it. So if my hands are sweaty or oily or whatever, I don't have to squeeze this as tight to hold on to the rifle. I can just put this between my fingers, and it helps increase my my hold on the rifle. Okay, so I guess what we're going to do is on an LR308 platform, both your takedown and your safety selector springs and detents go in the bottom, whereas on an AR-15 build, there'll be a hole back here for your spring and detent for the rear takedown pin. So that's a little bit different on the large caliber lower receivers. Okay, so in the Aero Precision kit, they give you a standard AR-15 mil-spec dimension, mag catch lever, plunger, latch, whatever you want to call that thing. but they give you an extended size mag button. And this is the correct mil-spec size. So for some reason their M5 lower, they've decided to go with a larger button. This is an extended mag catch. You can see that it's a little bit longer. I think that this is the AR10A version is where I got this. And the reason I say that is because you can see that it uses the squared catch versus the AR10A, which has a different design. So I believe that's where I got this extended thing, was the AR10A. And you can see that this uses the square version also. So just for the video's sake, I thought I would mix and match different size buttons with the different size levers, and we'll see how that plays out on the receiver. I've already done it off camera, but I'll show you guys which combination of parts I'm going to use. And that was a spare part, and that was a spare part. Okay, so this is the Aero Precision setup, and I've got the latch screwed in as far as it can go before it starts interfering with the receiver. And you can see that on this receiver, that button sticks out quite a bit, and you don't quite get full thread engagement inside. So we don't like that. Okay, so before we get too far along on this mixing and matching parts, just to see what's going to work on my DPMS pattern, New Frontier Armory lower, the reason that Aero Precision gives you this extended button with a standard AR-15 mil-spec latch is because their M5 lower receiver is a little bit wider. And the way New Frontier Armory machined theirs was they designed the width and the machining in here to fit both an AR-15 mil-spec latch and a standard size button. But just to show you what happens when I use the AR-10A extended version with the Aero Precision extended button and the mil-spec, we already know that this kind of didn't work out with the AR-15. So we'll just go with the extended latch using the standard button to show you where that ends up. Okay, so AR-10A extended latch with a standard AR-15 mil-spec button. You can see that that's not going to work. Okay, so on a New Frontier Armory lower receiver, it looks like the mil-spec button and the mil-spec latch is what fits perfect. Now, if you're using an Aero Precision or maybe somebody else's lower, you may want to go with the extended that comes with the Aero Precision kit. So anyway, I just wanted to demonstrate different combinations of mixing and matching and how we finally ended up back at mil-spec for this receiver. Okay, so a lot of manufacturers that make these large caliber AR platform bolt catches, there's some things that they do not get right. The relationship between the pinhole and this cutout here that gives you clearance between your upper and your lower when you're actuating it. And I'll get this put into the receiver, and we'll show a little bit more in detail about what happens when these aren't built right. Okay, so one area that can become a problem on a lot of these builds, if you're using the wrong bolt catch receiver or receiver bolt catch combination, is this radius section right in here. If that's not cut right and is not in the proper relationship to the pin, what happens is as you actuate your bolt catch, or it tries to stop the bolt on the last round, that radius will come up and interfere with the top of your receiver. If there's not enough radiance cut, it hits the receiver, and then it won't allow this to actuate high enough to catch the bolt. So that's one area of concern. Okay, so another area that often isn't quite right is this nub here on the front of the mag catch that engages with the follower and raises this to catch the bolt on the last round. A lot of times that engagement is not very good. And on my first build, I wanted to use a Wilson Combat because he uses S7 tool steel, which is pretty strong, so there's less chance of this thing exploding on you. Most manufacturers are using a cast steel. So I think Wilson uses better material, but on his design, this didn't quite engage the magazine follower enough. Now, because I don't have the receiver and the bolt carrier on here, this is sitting up a little bit higher than normally it would. Normally it's going to be sitting a little bit lower, probably right about there, and catch more of the edge of the follower. But this is a common issue also. And then the other problem with these catches is sometimes the height of this dimension is not quite correct, and the width. So it does not catch enough of the bolt to successfully lock it back. So it looks like we're going to be okay here. I would like a little bit more engagement on that. So if I run into any issues as far as holding back on the last round or not holding the bolt open, or if this doesn't engage the bolt enough to where maybe I bump the rifle and it lets the bolt go, then I'll swap this out. Now on my first build, I used a KAK, and it seemed to have a little better fit than this Aero Precision. This nub here was a little bit more towards the center of the magazine. But I think we covered most of the bolt catch. So anyway, this looks like it'll work. And like I said, normally this isn't going to come up. When you have your bolt and receiver down, it's going to be sitting more about there for a little better engagement on the follower. Okay, so I think we got the bolt catch covered. Things to watch out for. Aero Precision, as far as I can tell by looking at it, does look like it's cast steel. It's not machine tool steel. Okay, so on this build, I'll be using a Wilson Combat single stage. This is their, what is it, 3.5 to 4 pound? It's not the LE or the mill. The mill has a pound heavier pull. Seen some videos on YouTube where people have installed these and they either forgot to mention it or they just didn't know. And one thing about Wilson Combat is on the trigger pins, you'll see that there's only a groove on the outside of one end of the trigger pin. And that makes these directional when you're using a Wilson Combat trigger, because the way Wilson captures the trigger pins is these capture springs on the side of the trigger. So with the groove only being on one end, you got to make sure you put these pins in so that the groove lines up with those spring-loaded clips, retaining clips. The other thing is, with the Wilson Combat design, you can install the trigger without the selector installed, or you can install it with the selector installed, and so it doesn't matter. So that's kind of a plus. If you're doing a mil-spec trigger, there's a certain sequential order, and if you get yourself out of whack, you won't be able to get your trigger in. But Wilson Combat doesn't matter. Okay, well, we'll start getting some of this stuff installed. I'm going to get the rear takedown and the pivot pin. On your 308 platforms or your large caliber AR platforms, the front pivot pin is fully enclosed. It's not like a half cutout. So getting this section here put together is a little bit more tricky than an AR-15. I can't actually show you a whole lot of this install stuff Otherwise, the powers that be will get upset and delete my video and give me a strike. So anyway, let me get the pins installed. I will give you a hint that I use a paper clip to push the spring and detent down for the pin install, or if you have to take your pin out. And so let me get the pins installed off camera, and I may go ahead and put the trigger in off camera, and then we'll take a look at how it came out. Okay, so we ran into a problem. So we're probably going to end the video here today. This pin will not latch into the closed position. You can see it, the detents are working on the capturing it on the way out, or I mean on the way in. But on the way out, it's not, the detent is not latching into the pinhole. It's covered up by grease. So my gut feeling is it's the pin. I think the hole is either maybe slightly undersized or it's not quite in the right spot. So I'm going to pull this pin out, take a close look at the hole, compare it to the one that is working, and we'll try to figure out why this doesn't latch in closed. I tried tapping on it, I tried twisting it, it just doesn't want to latch closed. So like I said, that's the first issue we've had on this build today. Everything else went in perfectly. The rear pin works fine. It gets captured on the way out, and it snaps in nice and tight on the inside. You actually got to push pretty hard to get it to unlatch. So I just think there's something going on with this pin. So I'm going to take it apart, look at the pin, and I'm probably going to head down to Frontier Armory and get a set of their lower pins if I can't figure out what's wrong with this one. All right, Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out.